So I've got the first bit of heater hose in, just a straight piece of 3/4. I trimmed this back about a 1/2 inch to get off the old rusty end. This is a 3/4 by 3/4 elbow, and that's going to put it down here, and then we'll have to eventually tie into the rest of the stuff. But I'm waiting on the radiators, so I don't want to trim that because I'm going to have to trim this 2 section of hoses, 190 here and then 190 there. When I do this, I'm going to have to trim them to length, so I want to make sure I've got the radiator so I know where the outlet's going to be and all that good stuff. And I got the distributor in. So that should be good. There's one little odd thing about this motor. The marks in the timing wheel, you can just see that notch there. That's actually the advance mark. That I bought it up to top dead center when I was fixing it, and I scribed in some marks here. You probably can't see them on this camera, but it's just kind of an odd thing to go by. Don't think that that notch is TDC, because it is not. It's easily 15 degrees, I think. I've been looking at how to hook my heater hose up, and I've got the end connected up at the pipe that runs under the manifold, okay, but as I run it down, I've got it to sort of snake down between the serpentine belts and the bottom of the alternator and all that. But when I get down to the lower part where I have the new piece of metal tubing to go into the radiator, lower radiator hose with a nipple for the 3/4 inch hose, he used to make a really tight bend. So I suppose you could do that putting a spring inside the hose, but I don't like that. So I picked up one of these. This is, I got this at Granger's. It's called a copper return, I think they call it. 3/4 inch. This is 3/4 inch female. And I'm going to use that. So the problem is, being female, I'll have to put a piece of this pipe in, and then the 3/4 hose will fit over this all right. It'll be a bit of a stretch. But I don't know if you ever used copper pipe on a plumbing system before. But when you put the rubber hoses on, the ends like to work their way off because it's just not enough friction. Well, I bought this tool from Jags for another project a while ago. They call this tubing beater, and it fits 5/8 and larger pipe. So it's similar to what we did when we made the dust cover for the transmission. There's 2 rollers. This is just hand operated, and it's just mounting in the vise on this flange. Sit that in, snug this down, and then you just turn. You're going to hold it and make sure it doesn't walk off, and it'll take, just like when you're cutting pipe, it takes a few turns to do the complete device. That should be enough. As you can see, that's made just a really nice bubble. As a matter of fact, I may have made that a little large, I don't know. But after I get the hose on there, it's never going to come off, so that's great. So, let's say this came from Jags. Wasn't terribly expensive. I wound up had a problem doing the exhaust on this car. That this car uses on the header pipe where it comes into the manifolds. It uses the end of the pipe is flared, and then there's a flange, and then it has an asbestos gasket. And I was having a hard time finding anything to fit that. And what they sell now, they don't sell the gaskets. They just sell a piece of pipe with a couple of rolls like this in it. So I took a piece of exhaust, which this was really not designed to be rolling something quite that heavy. But nonetheless, I made a pair of, they call them olives, I think. It's essentially a piece of exhaust pipe with a pair of these on it, as close as practical. And that worked in the exhaust, and it worked really good. So, kind of a neat tool. Don't get to use it often, but boy, it sure is nice when you need it. And it goes down to 5/8. So the only problem I have is that a lot of the Triumphs and stuff, they use 1/2 inch heater hose stuff, and it won't go to 1/2 inch, unfortunately. But I suppose they have to draw a line somewhere. But there we go. While I'm just gabbing away, there's the other one. So now I'll just trim these off the length, insert them into there. Enough room, probably maybe about an inch beyond, so there'll be enough room for a clamp here. I'll just sweat solder those together and we'll be done in a nice tight bend. I'm going to solder this up, so typically take your piece, clean it up on a piece of emery cloth. I think I've already done a lot of this, so we're just kind of showing you a bit. So it'd be really difficult to sand in here. I suppose you could if you had to, but this is a brand new fitting. It's really pretty clean. And you want to take some flux all the way around both pieces. Insert that. There we go. Nice snug fit. This is MAP gas, but a lot of people just use propane. I like MAP. It's a bit hotter. It's got some flux is just starting to boil up out of the cracks. I'm sure you can't see it on the camera, but it is. The big trick of this, you want to make sure that the copper is hot enough to melt the solder and not the flame. And you just work around the edge and you're done. It doesn't take much. It's not a very big gap. Let's say the big trick, make sure the copper is melting your solder. Otherwise it's not going to flow down the crack. It also means you want to work your heat around to try to keep the heat even. You're not just got a lot of heat on one side. There you go. 2 sweat soldered. Definitely want to make sure you want to wipe down your joints after, otherwise there'll be flux on there. And the flux is an acid and it's an abrasive. And you'll find that it'll corrode the pipe. If you ever go do copper plumbing and you see a bunch of green spots all over the place, that's because the last plumber didn't wipe the flux off. So it's really best to do this with a wet rag, but I happen to have one right here. But seeing as I can move this around, I'll probably just take it inside and rinse it off. These are the ends of the flex lines for the oil cooler, and I just took these are what held the rubber hoses on. Basically just slit them down either side with a hacksaw, and then because these are unusual in that they have a very thick end here, I just used a cold chisel to split them. If you ever have a tool they call a nut cracker, basically doing the same thing. I just put them up on the vise, take the cold chisel, hammer, bang, 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 split pretty easy, and that way there you don't risk getting the saw blade into the pipe. It scratched at a couple of spots, but I don't think that's going to matter. But this, I don't know about this. I mean, I really expected to see something more like that here. It's what you typically see. Of course, these hose ends, they crimped in a very small area, and I suppose, well, yeah. I suppose that crimp lines up with that deep notch. So I may take and just do a little bubble flare on the end here, just to give me a little more meat to grab a hold of, because the ferrules that I'm going to use are the long style like that, and they crimp over a larger area, so I'm not sure. It's probably okay with this, because this is only this is oil pressure out of the engine, so with these big V8s, that 40-50 pounds is high on them. I mean, even the TRs only run up to, they're supposed to cut out at 70 psi at 2,000 RPMs hot, and when they're cold they can hit 80 or so. It's just not a lot of pressure when it comes to hydraulics, but that just seems kind of wimpy to me. So I looked. I don't have a proper double bubble flare tool that will fit this 1/2 inch pipe. The biggest I have is 10 millimeter. This is my standard double flare pipe, which you don't typically use to make bubbles because it doesn't make the right size bubble. But I don't really want to make a true bubble flare. I just want to make, something for the hose to grab on. So I've set this. I only set it about half the normal height that you do. Usually you bring it up to the top of that first step. Because I just want to try it. I've never tried this before, but I'm just going to try and bubble it out just a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. Well, one good thing, it roughed up this piece of the pipe quite a bit. Didn't really flare it as much as I wanted. Well, let's try something different. Didn't work doing a bubble flare, so I'm just going to try a standard single wall flare. See if I can't get a bit of something on this thing. But you can see I've managed to flare that a little bit. I don't want to go too big, otherwise it's going to be trouble to put the hose on. And we need these. So this is a hydraulic crimping tool. It has different size dies that fit in it. These are actually the smallest ones I have. They're 6s. So they're probably familiar with seeing those shapes on any like airlines or things that you bought. And then they're mounted on rubber. And then these pins locate them. So it just goes into the tool here. So on here I've found a ferrule. So I'm going to push it onto the pipe. And that's at the fully engaging that notch. I want to go a little bit further than that. I don't want to go too far because I want to hopefully crimp this on some of that roughed up area in the pipe that we made trying to put the flare on, which didn't really work very well, to be honest. I think all it's doing is the pipe is sliding in the clamps. So put that in, turn this bottom, it tightens the clamp up. Make sure that your rubber pipe is fully engaged up to that edge. And then you just close the shutoff valve. There's a little hydraulic handle on the big handle here. I'm just pumping that now. And it's crimping that. So that's done relatively tightly. So I'm sure you've all seen that kind of thing before. That's not moving when I pull on it, so I guess that's okay. So I'll go ahead and make up the other one. I obviously don't need 8 feet of pipe with this thing. So this bigger, I'll make up the 2 ends while I'm here at the bench. Go underneath with all the extra pipe, and then I can just trim this to length, make it fit into the car. So we've got the oil cooler plumbed in now. These are the lines coming up. They run up, they come through. Probably really can't see this, but down behind the brake booster, underneath there. And there are the 2 lines right there. You can see them better there. They go into the original positions. Even managed to get the little clamp on it. That long hose hanging down is the water line that's not connected yet. So that's in. So next, get the AC to work again. What I need to do now, I need to put the air conditioning condenser in. Mounts on that tab there. Goes right up against the grill, as you can see. There's no room in the front of this car. I was really lucky to find the space for this. I also figured that if I wind up having to put an oil cooler on the transmission, there's room on the back of the radiator for it. This is the radiator here, this is the bottom. And if I slide this fan up a bit, then there'll be room here for another radiator if I need it. So I'm going to try it without it because I've got the increased airflow or the oil flow by changing these tubes. These were the same as what went into the Borg-Warner Type 35. It's the same at both ends. It's a weird kind of tubing flare end brass kind of a fitting. I'd never seen one before. So I made these up instead, but that'll greatly increase the flow rate. And of course you can see there's the tube inside the tank, and it comes all the way up here, so it's not going to get any bigger than that. So hopefully that's enough to cool it. I filled it with oil and water, transmission fluid. Let it sit for a while, no obvious leaks. We turn the motor over for a bit, help get the oil moving around, and the oil went down on the stick, so it's moving through the engine. So I just kind of guessed at the timing, but I guess we'll see if it'll start. So we'll have to investigate. I changed out the distributor for the one that used to be in this car because I wasn't getting any spark. Couldn't really see the obvious reason. Just went ahead and changed it out. This one has the internal electronic ignition, whereas the other one had a box on the thing there. So let's give it a whirl. That's too far advanced. Wasn't a lifter. My bell housing plate was touching the teeth of the crank position sensor just barely. So I just pulled that off and took a hammer and adjusted it a little bit. You can see now it's quiet. Seems to be running pretty good. I'm just topping up all the levels. Making some adjustments. So I had a noise underneath, and this is what it is. That unused position sensor was just touching these two spots, and I think that's because this was bent a little bit. I don't know whether I didn't quite get it flat when I was making it or putting it in. It got bent a little bit, but anyhow, I've since straightened it and flattened it out, and it should be okay. I'll show you where it was hitting. Right here, this tooth wheel is a crank position sensor, and right here is just touching from those two bolts. So I'm going to straighten that out. So I shut the motor off because this belt had walked off of this pulley, and I thought, that's kind of odd. I don't know if you can see this, but right here, look at this gap. This is a brand new tensioner, and it's, I don't know, the effect of bushing in it or something. It's freaking pulling away from the front of the bell housing, which is why making the belt walk off. So, anyway, got it running. Transmission works, at least up on the lift. Got it to go forward and backwards. It's charging. There's oil pressure, water circulating. The fans came on for the radiator. Still not starting very easy, but I haven't timed it yet. I was getting ready to time it when this whole belt thing happened, and I don't really want to run it because running off the side like that's going to chew the heck out of that belt. I'll have to get another tensioner. So it's kind of annoying to say the least. Say that's brand new. I just bought it. It's got 15 minutes on it, but the motor runs and it sounds good. So I haven't had a chance to try out the speedometer or anything yet. I just up on the lift. I put it in gear, put it in drive. Wheels go forward. Put it in neutral. The wheels stop. Put it in reverse. Wheels go backwards. All those good things. And it doesn't seem to be leaking. I had a little hydraulic leak at one of my unions for the transmission lines. I just snugged that up. Other than that, it seems to be good. So, considering how big a job this was, that's a tiny amount of problems, really. Just a couple of teething problems. I had one little drip on the water line and it snugged one of the clamps up, and that seems to have gone away. So, anyway, so I think this will conclude this. I mean, obviously still need to put the bonnet on and a few other things, but it's all pretty boring stuff now. So I hope you enjoyed my Rover Driveline upgrade. I'm waiting to last a little bit so I can enjoy it on the road. See you later.